If you're wondering how a licensed therapist and certified personal trainers and nutrition coaches think about GLP-1s, this is the episode for you. Or if you're considering being on a GLP-1, want to get off a GLP-1, or just want to know what it's all about, again, welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to use a GLP-1, semaglutide, Ozempic, tirzepatide, all of the things in the best way possible, both from a mental health and physical perspective. So if you're ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind.
Yay.
We're late to the game on this, but it's because both of us were kind of like, do we even want to bring this up? But I think that now that we have so much research and understanding, there are things that we agree with and we don't agree with that we talk about today. But if you want to jump to that portion of the episode, check out the show notes below, because now we're just going to talk about it ourselves.
Yep.
So,
I've got a question for you from, did my mic cut off again? No.
Nope.
Good. So my girlfriend, she's a social, she was a social worker, and then she did the path where now she has her own practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so she sees a lot of teens because she's contracted with the schools.
Mm-hmm. And
because I was like, a lot of them are having she has clients struggling with wanting to lose weight, and they don't know how or how healthy ways or access to healthy foods. And then we talked a little bit about GLP-1s as well. And then she talks about the food noise, but they can't afford the shots, blah, blah, blah. And then, so a lot of it, she wants to attend a training or conference in regards to healthy tidbits, small manageable goals, and going back to focusing on their depression, anxiety, as the eating is usually a form of symptoms from their diagnosis. Does that make sense? Really, just for like a quick breakdown.
Yeah.
Do you have like conference people or like resources that people can look to that you would recommend based on your education working with that population? On managing emotions, but then also with the food part, and then also being a teenager, and then not being able, you can only control so much, right? Because now they're talking about going back to what we're going to talk about, GLP-1s being prescribed for kids and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
I know. Stupid. So I was like, oh, I'll ask Christina.
I mean, in all reality, the food noise is a thought process. It's a cognitive behavioral process. So in this person's case, sharpening up our cognitive behavioral therapy skills is going to be helpful for that. I don't have any resources other than going through our program. She can go through the method herself to understand how we connect, how we lead up to those cognitive beliefs, right? So what experiences in our lives led up to those cognitive beliefs, and then how to begin to stop and be aware of those cognitive beliefs to thus create better behaviors. And then we take it a step further of then helping meet those unmet needs that were not met in childhood, that, create new beliefs about the self. It all comes back to that. Like, food noise is a thought process that is connected to behaviors. That's it. It's not this, depression is thought process. Right? And with food noise, people will try to justify that it is some sort of
like psychological disorder,
chemical imbalance in the brain, right? But if that's the case, then why doesn't it exist in other cultures?
Oh.
Right?
Or why didn't it exist until now?
Or obesity, right? But obesity doesn't, like the trend of obesity, we're the highest country with obese persons, 74% people being overweight or obese in our country. That is not true for every other country. So if it is a mental illness, then it would affect everyone.
So it's more of a symptom of the mental illness, the obesity.
Correct. Well, and also food noise did not happen to our ancestors. Could schizophrenia happen to our ancestors? Sure. Right? We see documentation of people kind of losing their minds throughout history.
Oh yeah.
But we've not this whole food noise thing has not necessarily been something like our ancestors who survived on not eating for days and days, right? They weren't sitting there like, you know, their
like
heads weren't
glucagon, like peptide is low.
exactly. So,
oh my gosh.
it's been developed over time. And as a, you know, we have to realize that like these struggles with food developed as our availability of food became less scarce. So if that's true, then we can recondition these responses in our brains. It's going to take a lot of work, but like just as they were conditioned, we can recondition them. Plus, for that person, look at those kids' diets first.
Yeah.
If they're full of processed foods that are designed to be addictive, that's only, you're basically giving alcohol to the alcoholic.
That's what I was going to say is you're talking about like we can recondition our brains, but consider like your brain has been conditioned based on the information you're giving it or like the nutrients you're giving it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I hear with GLP-1s, and that's why I wanted to do this subject here, this episode. People are like, well, I've tried everything. I've gone to therapy. I've done the diets. I'm like, you haven't tried everything. You've tried mainstream diets to try to change your mental health, right? And then you go to therapy that is not there, unless people are going to people who are actual therapists who specialize in food and body obsession, which probably not, because I just went to that
dinner.
Networking dinner, and there was only 6 of us there, right? Oh, and then we're in Scottsdale, right? So like, I went to therapy. Oh, you went to therapy for food noise? You knew that was a thing? Did you know? You know, no, you didn't. And so people just, I forgot what you said before that.
I don't know. Well, because we were supposed to talk about our lives, and then I was like, well, I got a question about this. And then we started talking about the GLP-1s. Do you want to talk about our lives too?
Well, then, what I want to say. So then people try these restrictive diets, right? They try to cut out the addictive foods all at once. They put too much stress on their brains. Their brain has their anti-reward system that kicks in and is like, this is too much. They lose motivation. They go back to the way they ate because they put too much stress on the body at one time. Right? Which is not what we do here. Like we slowly bring people out of things because that's how it should work. But GLP-1s people are taking them. And unfortunately, if you do not have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, you are being prescribed GLP-1s in a way that is not helping your body, but you want to lose weight. The reason why I say that is because if your body is taking something and you have zero energy, you can't eat, you have diarrhea, you have nausea, you have all of these things, then your body's kind of like, hey, I don't like this. Something's going on here. But because you solely just want to lose weight, you're taking a dosing of this thing that is way too high for you just to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever it is. Right? That's my issue with these is that the dosing that people who are not type 2 diabetics are receiving clearly doesn't work for their bodies because they're getting physically ill. And we need to look at dosing, which I will talk about today.
Do we want to just go into it?
Do it.
So do you have other issues you would like to present to the court? Because then I can present my issues. That way people know our biases when we're going through this. I think that's
number 1
for them to know.
Food noise is a cognitive behavioral process that requires someone who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy to help you get out of. Number 2, we've got to work on dosing. Do I believe that GLP-1s have a great impact on certain populations? Yes. But we don't want to be taking the dosage for someone who has an insulin issue if we don't have an insulin issue.
Yeah.
Number 3, we need to make sure that we are not staying in our behaviors that we started with. Just because you're losing weight, you're actually fucking up your metabolism even more if you're not changing your lifestyle. That's my camp. You go.
My camp is majority of people that I have engaged with that are taking it are doing it for weight loss specifically, hoping to feel better about their body when, again, going back to like the original issue was not necessarily their body, but how they viewed themselves. And then the restrictive dieting. And they've never actually like ate food. Like, and when I mean that, like, no, like they never really did like this, didn't do a diet. They were always on a diet mentally or whether they were actually participating in it. So they've never seen how much they could eat and then going from there. Two, I think a lot of people have, there's a huge debate between compound pharmacies, and this goes into your dosing issue. Compound pharmacies and your generic pharmacies, there's a lot of misinformation about both. I find it rather interesting that we're also hesitant, and this is like, again, taking my views outside of this, that we're also hesitant to take vaccines or also hesitant or gung-ho to do the COVID shot when that came out. And now everybody's just injecting themselves with these things, which you could say, because then the rebuttal to that is these have been on the market for X amount of years.
Well, they're peptides too.
They're peptides too. But then don't use, like you can't do both, in my opinion.
I agree with you on that.
Choose one, you know, and again, I don't care if you don't want to vaccinate anybody in your home. I really don't. But like, you can't use that statement and then do this and then not do that. And then it just doesn't make sense because they were still developed by big pharma. So if you're distrusted with them, go ahead.
And the pharmacy that makes, Ozempic, for example, in Switzerland, right? Swiss people are not allowed to take this. Yeah. They're not allowed to take these drugs.
Why? Just because?
Also, they are 10 times the price here in America.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, come on. What the fuck?
So yeah, there's our platform.
Oh, and one more thing.
Go.
You're right. I also think conspiracy theory, what if like all the like, when people thought that they were like putting, you know, little chips in our brains through the COVID vaccine, they just were like, well, fuck it. What do people struggle with? Weight loss? Boom. That's the thing.
Like, how do we get Americans to buy in? What do they hate the most? Themselves. How do we like,
they're like, I don't want to die from this COVID vaccine, but I will definitely die. Yeah. Like, I'll put this needle in my eye if it's going to help me lose weight.
Fucking fecal matter coming out of their mouth in worst case scenarios. Jesus. God. That's what I'm so like, again, there's extremes to it. Most people, you know, are just eating less and fucking up their metabolism. But I also think like, again, when I also hear it like, oh, I just want like a little bit right here to like, I'm just waiting. And if you're not watching, I'm pointing to like my arm, like the bat wings that people talk about. Right. Like, I just want to lose right there. And it's like, okay, the peptide's not going to be like, okay, she said right there, we're going to lose right there. Like, it's just going to go wherever it can go. And then you need more and more and more to keep losing the weight. And then you're kind of just like fucked. Right. So,
no, I agree. So if you don't want to hear anything about any of that and how we're going to help you get through this conversation, then just go check out the other 80 something episodes we have. So GLP-1s are glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists, are a class of medications primarily used to help manage blood sugar levels in people with type 2 diabetes. They mimic a hormone. Yes, we make this hormone called GLP-1, which the body naturally produces in the intestine. GLP-1 helps to regulate blood sugar by stimulating insulin secretion, slowing digestion, and reducing appetite. This is a class of medications that has gained popularity because of its effectiveness in promoting weight loss. But let's not forget, it is for those with type 2 diabetes, like everyone in my family. Anything else?
No, it just has the action basically on the stomach emptying and like your signals. And it's interesting because I'll go back to a client that I am working with currently. She took one of these. And when we say GLP-1s, we're using like a blanket term because there's other names: trizepatide, Wegovy, Ozempic, semaglutide, Trulicity, and then even there's more than those of these names. It just depends on how it's compounded, where it's from, and like or which provider is providing it. So we're going to mostly use the word GLP-1. But so she was taking one, and she's having a hard time right now. And she was like, I feel like that the GLP-1 that I took like totally disconnected me from food. And I was like, yeah, it did, because she had an emotional eating thing before, took the GLP-1, lost weight, regained weight, and then some, and now is trying to better her relationship with food. But during
Mhm.
that time, she just didn't eat, and so it was great, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
there's that to consider when Christina's talking about like, okay, the shit before needs to be worked on. Like again, if we have clients who want to work on this or are on these things or want to get on these things, we will support them. But they're almost like when we talk about intuitive eating or not tracking, like there needs to be a checklist of things we've covered before, and then let's move forward. And that's not to say like we want to hold you back from reaching your goal. It's more so of we just want to be able to help predict the future with you so we can
Mhm.
tackle it together as opposed to playing catch up.
Right. Well, with the clients that we have with GLP-1s too, like usually they come to us after having like come on and come off. And I will say that it is a bitch
Yeah.
to get these people to even like
Eat more.
say they wanted to lose more weight because they
Mhm.
got on and it made them sick or whatever that looks like.
It's
It
hard.
is hard,
Hard.
hard because they've fucked up their body so
Yeah.
much. So we're going to talk about how to not fuck up your body. In an effort, if you are using these, and then also again, what to do to come off. But people who need a GLP-1, again, type 2 diabetes, weight management, some are approved for obese or overweight, right? That's not the 10 pounds you need to lose. I hear that all the fucking time. And then also there are some protective measures around the heart,
Right.
as well as anti-inflammatory measures around like the brain and such. But we're seeing such an increase of individuals who want to lose 10, 15 pounds because they're too fucking lazy to try to do it on their own. Now, that's not talking about like my gals with PCOS. I will talk about that and touch on that. But people are like, well, I just want to do this the quick, fast way, right? So they take it, they lose the 15 pounds. 6 months later, take it again, lose the 15 pounds. But now the 15 pounds is becoming a little bit harder to do. So they inject more into their bodies. And this process happens because of what we're going to talk about, which is putting themselves in a catabolic state and ultimately fucking up their endocrine system and their metabolism.
And one thing I want to say to this too is there a lot of times you'll hear like I'm gonna like lose the weight and then we'll work on like the actual shit. And I've said this before of when have you ever done something then decided to go back and improve? They improve like it's not like you built a house and you're like, I should probably rip down this wall and figure it out again and just make it a
Mhm.
little bit more upright. It's
Right.
more so of like, okay, that's wonderful and I'm so glad, but you've probably done that before. So unfortunately, the next task or the next method of trial and error is to work through this, whether you're on the GLP-1 at the same time, which can make it harder because of that lack of feedback that you're getting from your body, or
Mhm.
to work on it before, like I talked about, making sure you have your checklist and then going on it too. So that way
Right.
you can give yourself the most optimal opportunity to succeed with this. So you're not cycling like you're talking about of 10 pounds loss, back off, 10 pounds back on, back and back and forth. I hiccup a lot now because of there's a baby in my belly.
Yeah. Well, it's that you're just creating a yo-yo
Yeah.
diet, but you're doing it for
With the
the
GLP-1 instead of Weight Watchers.
right, exactly, 1000%. And now we're putting in peptides in our body that we may not need in an excessive amount.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know, there is not research on what this is going to look like long term, right? From the way I'm seeing it, and this is not any evidence based by any means. I mean, it's evidence based with the clients that we have is that they, again, once we get them off of it, trying to lose weight the natural way is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Hard. Whereas, and these are people like one of them, I worked with her. She lost 50 pounds with me naturally. I had left that company. They went and put her into a new program. She said some things happened in her life mentally that caused her to need more support. She asked for more support. They didn't give her the support. Blah, blah, blah. Gained 30 pounds back. Went on a GLP-1, felt like shit, started, seeing some weight loss. She lost around 10 pounds, but her body was like freaking out. And then it became really difficult for her to lose weight with me. And, I see that a lot.
I have a hard time like getting their calories up too. Like just feel like for the body type that they're in with the exercise, like all the things that we consider for like where we'd like calories to be, to me, they're still so low. Like post GLP-1 that I'm like, gosh, and I can only push it so much because they feel full, or they feel like I'm not hungry. Like everything is almost shut down of that hunger signal.
Well, when one of my clients, she's very open with me about like how much she was eating when she was off of it. She came to us she was getting off of it and she wanted to build back her muscle because she's like, I'm so flabby, right? Squishy, I think is the word she used, not flabby. And, I wanted to reverse diet her. I had to reverse diet her out of 900 calories.
Ooh.
Right. And even then, because what we have to realize, guys, is when you see these big drops in weight, okay, if the majority of, if a good chunk of it is muscle, we are slowing down our metabolism. Right. So say that she lost 30 pounds on this GLP-1, but 30% of that was muscle, where her maintenance normally would be at her height and weight may not be that anymore because she has a higher body fat percentage than she does muscle. So I might say her maintenance normally at, 5'7", 130 pounds might be 1,800 calories. But because she's so under muscled, her maintenance might be 1,500 calories, 1,400 calories, right? So that's the biggest struggle, is that we are not trying to protect our muscle mass. And then also we're not using this opportunity where food noise is lower to do the fucking work on why food noise was there in the first place. Just because it's gone doesn't mean that the history of why it showed up goes away. Right. So why not? It's kind of like GLP-1s can be looked at as like treatment is looked at. Like I'm pulled out of my environment where I, turn to alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. And for GLP-1 in the brain, it shuts down that reward center of the brain to want that dopamine hit of food. So why not take that time where it's kind of quieted down, where I can bring up the hard stuff, I can get uncomfortable, I can do the things which in turn will also help us see what other forms of comfort you might turn to instead. Because I'll see people like sleep a ton to disconnect, shop, gamble, sex, social media, right? So they may not have the food. So the food noise is quiet, but they still have emotions, right? They still believe what they believe about themselves. So we'll also kind of see these other little like soothing skills, if you will, creep up. But then also we can do that work without grabbing towards the food when the food noise is lower. Yeah,
I think you're saying it wonderfully.
Yeah. So things, when we're talking about this, I want you guys to consider a few things. Number one, be really careful about where you get this stuff, because everyone and their mother is selling it at this point.
Yes.
You had talked about compounded versus pharmacy. What are your thoughts around that?
For me, I think a compound pharmacy is just fine. Like I don't see,
as long as it's,
like reputable. Yeah. So here's a couple examples of what I hear. The compound pharmacy is fine, and they're able to do it in smaller doses than what the big pharma will say.
The pens.
Doses. Yeah. So
let's
like big
explain
pharma,
that real quick.
The pens.
Yeah. Pens versus compounded.
Compound. So when you get it from, I will say like a general primary care physician, they're probably going to prescribe it through your general pharmacy, like a Walgreens or a CVS or something like that. When you get it from like the Novo Nordisk and I don't even know the other Purdue and all them, they only have the shot in certain amounts. So let's say like it's almost like let's think of it as like money, like change. There's only 1 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent, and 25 cent. That's it. But maybe I need 6 cents, or maybe I need 3, right?
Right.
So that's all you get. So sometimes you're overprescribed this peptide. And so that's where you start to see the symptoms. This is where I like the compound pharmacies, or maybe working with somebody who looks at the whole body system instead of just like, oh yeah, I understand you want weight loss. Totally. when they're asking, why do we feel that's important, and trying to look at your actual like health as opposed to you're in and out of the doctor. So now maybe if I need 3 cents or 2 cents, I can go to a compound pharmacy and that's actually the exact dose that I need. So trying to start off the lowest dose possible instead of just radically going for the highest or even like a middle point. Because also you have to keep in mind, the longer you use these, you're going to have to increase the dose. So if I already start at a higher dose than what I need, and then eventually I still need a higher dose, well, now I'm like over taxing the body.
You're
But I can't go
overdosing.
lower. Yeah, you're essentially overdosing on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets really tricky in that sense. And then
Yeah.
actually my neighbor is a compound pharmacist. And so I was like asking her about it, or not about GLP-1s exactly, but like the controversy. And she's like, I mean, we get checked all the time. Like you cannot do sketchy shit. For example, there is a person I know that is a nurse practitioner, and the nurse practitioners are prescribing it to each other.
Oh, I mean,
Yes. So and they're not like in an office where you would be prescribing. It's just because they have that prescription license that they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well,
Gotcha.
that's not ethical. So why is the compound pharmacy that has a legit pharmacist and has to uphold these FDA standards any more wrong?
Right. Well, and just to put it in perspective, so when you get a semaglutide, for example, from a compounded pharmacy, it comes in like a powder form, I believe. It's not, and you have to add, and because I've done a peptide, not semaglutide, but a different peptide from a compound pharmacy. Modesty was the one I did, remember? And it's powder, and then you have to take the water and you have to put it in there, and then you can determine how much you put into your body, right? So we've got to think about this, guys. Like, I cannot tell you how many people have gone to a general practitioner, general doctor.
Yeah.
I want to lose weight, and they can say, I've tried all these things, and instantly the doctor's like, okay, we'll put you on Ozempic 0.25 milligrams.
Right.
The same milligrams as someone who is type 2 diabetic. No ifs, ands, or buts in between. The same starting point. And you're a healthy individual, right? Now, here's where I agree with utilizing these things, and you sound like you do too, so we can get it from a compound pharmacy and start in very low doses and slowly bring it up. And then only when we start feeling really sick, then we know we've done too much, right? Because so think about this from testosterone, ladies. Testosterone is something that women need to use in their bodies, but say that they're like, nope, you have to be at 2.5. And that was the same as what a guy with low T would be at.
Yeah.
You'd be like, fuck no. Like, I don't need that much. Then why is it the same? You produce testosterone in your body too. You produce GLP-1 in your body too. Right? Because if you were at the same dosing that a man should take, you'd feel like shit. Just like people feel like shit on this 0.25, like whatever the dosing structure is. But if we can get it compounded and be able to start at like the first line of a syringe, whatever, I don't know what that is, and then, do that for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then go to the next line and then work your way up. I have seen people see the benefits of doing that and do it without any sort of side effects.
Because you brought up PCOS a little bit ago.
Oh, yes.
So tell me about that with your clients.
So with my clients with PCOS, it has been suggested to microdose semaglutide because of the insulin, the impact on insulin.
Yeah.
But they're insulin resistant. They're not type 2 diabetics. So there's an impact on insulin, and obviously there's anti-inflammatory properties to it. So PCOS in general is an insulin resistant type of diagnosis, right? And so that's why we see a lot of issues. And obviously it can also affect your testosterone as well. So we see issues with weight gain. We see issues with like hair growth. We see issues with infertility. So for PCOS clients, being able to start and just slowly bring it up over time, they're going to get the benefits of having that blood sugar regulation as well as managing inflammation in their bodies. But again, they're not type 2 diabetics, right?
Yeah.
So they can still see weight loss. They can still see all of the benefits by microdosing, rather than doing it in these, big time dosage where then they just feel even worse, right? Because they already feel not great in their bodies. Now, again, guys, we're not doctors, but we work with so many naturopaths and we associate ourselves with people who look at this from our perspective because we need our clients to have energy. We need our clients to have the motivation to do to eat the protein, to get the exercise in. Because when I microdose that with a PCOS client, I can work on continuing to, focus on an anti-inflammatory, high protein diet or whatever we're doing for them. We can work on building muscle so that they are in a metabolically sound body, right? But I need energy. I need them to feel good in themselves to be able to do that. If I just have them go straight to 0.25 and they already feel like shit, and then I add more fatigue, I add less food, I'm like, I'm working against myself.
Right.
And they're working against what they want. So it's this wonderful kind of way to use the GLP-1 while also continuing to build the lifestyle at the same time. Because you and I both know at a certain point with GLP-1s, there are, like, my best friend did it. She lost a lot of weight. She had some, this is someone who works out, strength trains, ate well. There's something autoimmune going on there, right? But she also still did the workouts, got her protein in, like did all of the things, right? But most people are not going to push through that discomfort of feeling like shit. And they're just going to not eat. They're not going to have bowel movements. They're not going to work out, right? They're going to feel fatigued. They're going to feel like shit. So that's what I gotta say.
So
PCOS.
let's talk about you referenced your best friend. Let's talk about what we'd recommend for people training, nutrition, and mindset wise if they're going to consider this or are doing it or have done it.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to consider is, even before putting a needle in my body, like, why am I doing this?
Ah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this, and what am I trying to get out of this?
Yeah.
If at any point you're trying to get a different sense of self-worth, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Your self-worth has nothing to do with the way you look.
Right.
You think that it does. It has everything to do with you existing, really. But it has to do with your beliefs about yourself.
Right.
So that's that. I would ask again, like, why am I doing this? So am I determining that this is going to change my life? Like, this is going to make everything better. Maybe say it that way. Then I wouldn't do it. But that would be the first thing. Why are you doing it in the first place? Or I mean, some of the girls I talk to, they're like, no, I'm fucking lazy. That's why I said that earlier. Like, there's some bartenders at the bar that Adrienne and Frankie like to frequent. And like, they're very close to those people because for a long time, like, those were the only people they knew because they moved to Vegas, right? They have like different like meetups and like just, it was a really fun environment. So these girls are like, no, I'm fucking lazy. Like, I don't want to exercise. I don't want to eat right. So I take this thing, right? It's probably not the reason you should be doing it.
I guess you have to be honest about why you're doing this. So even if you don't know the question of like, what are my expectations, but be honest about why you're actually doing it.
Right.
And I would say also, what is your relationship with your body already? Like, if it's coming from a place of self-hate, like you're talking about, then how are you going to magically fix that when you get to the place you want to be? Will you just all of a sudden love yourself? Probably not.
No. Yeah. So why are we doing this, right? What are our expectations from this? And get very real with yourself.
Yeah.
In regards to, let's start with the easy part, training. Well, I don't know which one's easy. Depending on what dosing you're going to have, we have to realize that with low amounts of energy coming in, that's going to be low amounts of energy to exert. Because the body has these systems in place that say, I'm not getting enough food, so therefore I'm going to slow down how much I have you move, right?
Right.
So that's, again, where microdosing comes into play. If you want to learn more about microdosing, we will link Dr. Trina Moore's whole thing, Tina Moore, thank you, about Ozempic. in the show notes. She has a whole course on it and like microdosing and the benefits of semaglutide and all of the things. Very much enjoy how she talks about it.
Okay.
As well as Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She's, I just had that workshop with her and that was brought up a lot. But again, it was also making sure we're strength training, right? So strength training is going to help preserve muscle mass. When we're not doing that, and you see this over and over again, people just losing the weight, you are putting yourself at risk for worse metabolic damage than you started with. You may be thinner, but you may have metabolic issues down the line because now we've lost a good chunk of our muscle. So depending on how you feel, right? And depending on how much energy you're getting, because as the dosing goes up, you're going to start to feel worse. We hear that from people all the time. So maybe at like the lower dosage, we can do, a more barbell, heavier type of training. And then as your dosing is increasing, maybe we move more to like dumbbells, TRX, body weight, right? Because again, we don't promote that. We don't promote using the standard dosing. But for those of you listening, if your energy levels, if you're eating 900 calories a day, then yeah, I know. Doing some body weight band resistance training for maybe 10 minutes.
That might be too much.
Right. So we can see, like, we're trying really hard to tell you what to do in regards to training. But if you're eating 900 calories a day and you're a grown ass woman, we just need to keep your brain alive at that point. We need to make sure that you have enough energy for your brain and your heart to be functioning.
I think this also depends training wise on what they were doing before too.
Right.
So for example, for our over exercisers that are not seeing the weight loss, it's like, well, yeah, maybe the problem initially is that you just need to back way off because you're in like this catabolic, like overactivity state. And maybe that solves your problem. But even then you cannot keep up your split routine or your everyday CrossFit routine if you're going to go on this. No. So going back to the mindset piece of this too, and we'll keep looping that back in before we get there, is how are you going to do that? Because to take someone who's not on a GLP-1 from like, okay, we don't need to work out every day to like 3 times a day, it's a mind fuck. And now you're doing it with the expectation that you're going to get weight loss, also with the expectation that you're going to be hungrier, also with the potential that you're going to have some trade-offs of symptoms and not feeling well. Like that's a lot. So I would say at most, maybe 3 days a week, full body at most, but even that might look, like you said, between body weight and barbells, there's so many things in between. I think also, as you said, as we adjust the calories, because calories are going to go lower and lower and lower, and Ozempic or whatever GLP-1 is going to go up and up and up, you have to adjust the program and not be committed and married to what you're doing. Right. It may mean like you don't finish the program. It may mean that you just now start walking or going for body weight exercises. It may mean that maybe we actually just work on mobility instead.
Right.
So
no, I agree.
There's a lot of options there, but you have to be willing to do that and not be married to the plan. But also, I feel like have to kind of figure out that there needs to be a plan for strength training as well.
Right.
Keep that muscle.
It's as we're talking about it.
Now that I'm saying that out loud.
Yeah, it's a battle because, I don't remember. It was, her name is Bree. Like she was the one who talked about it. Is like anytime, like if my client was doing anything that made them feel that sick and unwell, we're going to pull back. Right. Say it's lack of sleep. They're a new parent and they're not sleeping, or say that me right now, I'm going through a lot, and I don't feel great. So like, did I work out today? Yes, but I haven't worked out in 5 days prior to this. Right. So anything that makes my client feel like shit, I'm going to pull them back on their training. Right. And it is a battle because we're trying to maintain the muscle mass as much as we can. Now we can do that through trying to get protein in. But again, the higher and higher the dosing, the protein is the macronutrient that takes harder for the body to break down. If we already have slowing gastric emptying, which by the way, eating protein by itself will slow your gastric emptying. So if you're not doing that and considering a GLP-1, do that first. Now we have even slower gastric emptying.
Right.
So now my stomach, you know what I mean? It's just, so maybe you guys came here for tips on this.
I know, now that I'm thinking, I'm like,
now we're like,
like,
it's all fun and games when people say this out loud. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like,
well, it's all fun and games when they're like talking up how great it could be for these people. And I'm like, I believe that. But then you've got to realize like you're like, and you reference like alcoholism, you got to realize like you're essentially going through an intervention with this. You know what I mean? And so even talking about, okay, protein, we like ideally for clients to have a bare minimum of 100 grams per day from whole source foods, bare minimum. But I'll
unless
tell
you're
you
on a Mediterranean diet, because my med diet is lower protein.
Lower. So, okay, we'll be more graceful. 80 grams per day, bare minimum from whole source foods. But I'll tell you right now, it's so hard for women to even get that. And so if I'm already in a protein deficit, we'll say, then I'm adding this on and I'm not eating. And honestly, the last thing you want to eat when you're nauseous is protein, right?
Exactly.
So it's really, really hard. And now this is where a time where I would say as a coach, okay, then we've got to have the shakes and the bars because those aren't as substantially feeling, but I just need you to get something so we can at least help. But now is the gastric upset coming from the amount of like whey processed shit we're having or because of the peptide? I don't know. But we also don't know, like you're talking about, of most women don't really actually know how much they are eating. You know, they think when they have the binge or the ladies' night or whatever, the tapas with the girls, like, oh, that was so much food. And it's like, yeah, but the rest of your week, you're pretty low calorie. So now if I'm already low calorie, then I'm going on this and I'm further going now down to 900 calories. It's hard because I want someone eating at 1500 on a GLP-1, but they were eating at 13 and now they're on the GLP-1. They may be eating at 11.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah. So I guess the takeaway with training is,
back to training.
Figure out training based on how you feel. We want to be strength training to preserve muscle mass. Now, my friend, she did strength training up until, she got really sick. Like she started vomiting at the end there. And that's when she was like, all right, time to back off this. Yeah. So 2 to 3 days of full body, or you can do push pull legs type of training would be what I would say is ideal until we get to the point where we're starting to see those side effects and symptoms. Then we want to pull back to walking, but we might need to know like this could be at the expense of losing some muscle depending on the time frame that we're in that state.
I would also say don't expect to be getting significantly stronger during this time.
No. God,
because that's what you'll see. How do I build? They want to build muscle but lose weight, and it's like this is not the time that's going to happen.
Right? So just I agree. I agree. And so going on to nutrition is we want to keep that protein as high as we can.
Right.
For a lot of the people, like I have a friend who just finished this. It was a lot of the shakes. It was a lot of the bars. Right, trying to get in this processed food. But again, like you made a great point. Like I can't eat Quest chips because it hurts my stomach so bad. Yeah. Like that whey processed shit makes me so bloated, painfully bloated.
Yeah.
And I just can't do it. But, keeping that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're not as hungry, but you want to just make sure you have enough energy, is trying to increase your omega-3 fatty acids or your healthy fats, as they say. And you can do that with protein as well. So maybe instead of your leaner proteins or your low fat dairy items, we can do higher fat dairy. We can do, your chicken thighs,
salmon,
right? Exactly. Fatty fish is going to be helpful. Avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds. Yeah. Most of the time, your healthy fats are going to be low volume and higher calorie, but have a lot of nutrients in them. So by being able to make meals that are smaller in size, but have all these rich vitamins and minerals in them, you're going to feel better. Overall, you're going to have more energy. You're still going to eat less of them, right? But you should have more energy from that. And again, those macro and micronutrients from it to make you feel less shitty
Right.
overall.
And I think the point there that I want you listeners to listen to is that you're talking about mostly whole foods too with that.
Right.
It's not coming from the Quest chips or something. I would also say for these clients is try not to skip meals, try not to skip breakfast, especially. And why I say that is because it's so much harder to keep up with calories when we skip meals or skip breakfast in particular. So for example, eggs aren't like super filling in my opinion, but that's a good breakfast where it's high fat, high
Throw some
protein.
avocado on
Yeah,
there.
and throw some avocado. Even that, like even just one egg, I would be happy with you having as compared to nothing. Or
Right.
I rather have you have the one egg than the collagen shake and then have nothing until 1 p.m.
Right.
So just thinking of things like that of like, okay, how can I make sure I get my nutrients in? I may not necessarily feel hungry, but is that because of the shutting down of my system more so of like the communication? Or is it because I'm truly not hungry? Well, more likely than not, it's just that shutting down of the communication.
Yeah. And I think for some people, they think starving themselves is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, they're
Well,
like,
we all
oh,
did.
right. I did. I
Uh-huh.
totally did.
I did. I used to go snowboarding and I'd be like, oh, good. If I don't like have my snack, then I burn more calories. Like,
Right.
what? You
Yeah.
just like burnt like 800 calories going snowboarding for 6 hours.
No, seriously. So they'll kind of give themselves a pass to not eat.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to think about future us, right? So if I choose to not have this meal now, am I going to want to try to work out later?
Right.
And probably not. And if I don't work out later and this becomes my pattern, then what happens to, 5-10 year now from me, who's under muscled, still in a totally metabolically shitty place, more fatigued, probably more symptoms due to being in this, metabolic challenged, what is it called? Metabolically ill. I'm going to call it metabolically sick place,
Yeah.
if you will. What are the symptoms from that? So have the breakfast. Try to eat smaller meals throughout the day if you can, and focus on those higher fat proteins and fat, healthy fats to help get it in. Reduce your processed foods.
Yeah.
I have heard that processed foods makes the stomach hurt more, which is interesting to me.
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering, I have no evidence on this, but processed foods usually go through the gastric system pretty quickly,
Right.
but now they're staying around and they're kind of sitting there. I'm wondering if that causes a lot of like gas and like, unease and discomfort in the system, because normally it just like kind of, goes in and out because it's so processed, but now it's like slowed down and sitting there. So all those chemicals and shit are kind of sitting in your body. I don't know. That's just me thinking out loud.
To compound that, this is not an opportunity to just have whatever the fuck you want.
Oh God. And people do that.
People do that. They go, oh, it's fine. I'll just have this. I'll have that. And it's like, you're still, this goes back to your treating your body with respect statement that you come from, that you say a lot is that really respectful to yourself of like, I've got this, so I might as well just have whatever the fuck I want. It's like, I had one drink, so I might as well fucking get loaded every day. And it's kind of like, I mean, really? Like, that seems a little extreme. I mean, you can have one drink and still enjoy, but you also don't have to get fucked up.
I think the example of that is I'm going to have one drink. So I'm going to have like the super margarita with all of the calories and the salt and the strawberry juice and and then the Corona in it, that's 1,100 calories. They're thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to eat very much, so I'm going to go to McDonald's and have a quarter pounder and some fries, right? And again, your body thrives off of macro and micronutrients. There's a reason why the food that comes from the earth works for human bodies.
Right.
It's by design. Processed food was food that was created by man. That's the food that is not great for us, right? So our bodies thrive on macro and micros. So if we're making this, if we're spending all this money, we haven't even talked about that part. We're spending all this money on getting to what we call a healthier version of ourselves, then why not, again, eat the foods that are going to promote that. I followed this girl. I had to mute her because she was so annoying. She's like, well, my inflammation is down and she was like, my Hashimoto's is this and my blah, blah, blah is this and this is this and this. And then I'm thinking in my head, yeah, well, all of that happens with weight loss. So let's just throw that out there. She lost like 200 pounds. So yes, hypertension is down. Like all those things are
Right,
going to be
right,
down when you lose weight. Like duh, it's not the GLP-1, it's the weight loss that
right.
caused that, right? But also, by changing her diet and doing it in a way that is, supporting slow digestion, so high protein, whole foods, healthy fats, high fiber carbohydrates. If we just focused on that, we're basically getting the same response, right? But
Right.
we don't see it that way. We think that GLP-1 is the thing that caused that. If I would just change her diet to the way I just said, have her move a little bit more, manage the mindset, which we'll talk about, she'd probably be in the same place. And I've seen markers change. It's fucking awesome. I've seen
Right.
markers change in months just by doing it what we do here. So that's another thing too. People are putting like the GLP-1 is the reason, right? Yes, there are some benefits. Like we talked about PCOS is like helping with the insulin resistance. But it's not a fucking magic pill.
Yeah, I would say, like, let's go back to the house analogy. Like the GLP-1 is the painting of the walls, whereas
Love that.
the nutrition, the exercise, the mindset is the foundation, the actual building walls and the roof.
Structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I looked
love
up
that.
the cost. So without insurance, about 800 to 1,500 per month, which is flabbergasting. And
Yeah.
then with insurance, it's about 25 to 100 per month. But I would say like even like $100 a month for a medication is a lot. So,
Yeah.
I mean, geez. Okay.
Well, and it's just crazy, like on TikTok, how people justify like taking it and spending it. And they're like, well, I'm going to take this forever. I have to take insulin forever if I'm a diabetic. I'm like,
That's not the
if you have
same.
type 1 diabetes,
Not the same. Reversible.
my dad's
If
not
that's
taking it now. He is a
Yeah.
type 2 diabetic because his sugars are fine because he is in a hospital and they're, and plus my mom has got his ass in check when
Yeah.
it comes to food. And he's doing his workout. Did you know this man whose resting heart rate was 115 was still getting up and working out?
Oh my God.
He didn't tell any of us about this.
He's like, it's fine.
I'm like,
no, it's not.
yeah. So you don't have to take you don't have to take a lot of medications that have to do with being in a larger body. So any cardiovascular disease, any metabolic issues, you can come off of those if
Right. It's not a death sentence.
Right. But people will justify, well, I'm just going to take this forever, just like I take insulin forever. Or I take, I have a statin that I take forever. It's like, those aren't forever. They shouldn't be forever drugs. But of course, Big Pharma wants you to think that. So then you can pay them forever. So have fun with that.
Other things to think of while we're on GLP-1s is you talked about what's our purpose, what's our reasoning. Then we talked about how to view your body. Like, do you think this is a magic cure for how you see yourself? Another thing I wanted to add is, and we see this a lot, just clients on it or not, is the scale process because they have that certain number in their head that they want to reach.
Yep.
And then my question is always, what happens when you reach that number? Or what happens, like say my goal weight is 150, for example, what happens if I get to 151 and I plateau? Like, was the GLP-1 unsuccessful? Or do I go up to get that extra pound? Is my trade-off worth it? So what is your relationship with the scale? Is it determining your day? Is it determining your thoughts? Is it determining your value? And that all comes into play too.
Absolutely. It's, again, do I think it's great that there's people who need help who are in larger bodies? Yes. Like, this isn't, like you said, it's the painting on the walls of their process. But how do we get there? Why are we focusing on how the fuck we got there? No one's doing that.
Right.
We're just saying, it's okay.
Here you go.
But like, where, if you're,
I would say
I'm trying to think of an example of okay, we get to a really bad place and then we're rescued from it. So a real life example of this would be like, oh, it's okay you lost your house because you have a gambling problem.
Yeah.
and here, we're going to buy you out of your mortgage. That's never
Right.
going to fucking happen to you.
Without looking at like why we have a gambling problem.
Right.
Oh.
You know, or if that is the truth, it's called enabling,
Yeah.
you know, and we're enabling that. But again, we're not looking at how we got here.
Right.
I want you guys to hear me. I think it's great that people are getting this help, but I want these people to hear is what changed the noise in your head. Have you attempted to change that on your own? You are a thinker of your thoughts. You are not your thoughts, and not every thought that's put in your head is your own.
Right.
Okay. Have you tried to figure out how we got here? Because you are not in a overweight or obese body without some emotional shit behind it. I don't care what anyone tells me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Because okay, so someone's like, well, I have a medical issue. Okay, what's in your control then? You're just going to say, well, I have a medical issue. Here I am. I can't do anything about it.
Right.
No. Again, my dad has stage 4 fucking cancer, lung cancer at that. He drinks his protein drink at every meal. He gets up and he walks every day and he does his elliptical and his treadmill. Like, he could just sit here and be like, okay, I'm dying, but he doesn't, right? No, we don't, cancer is cancer and it's spreading, but that's not the story. He still is not victim to his circumstance.
Right.
So if we know that it shuts off the noise in my brain around food, then we need to figure out how that became. None of this just turned on one day.
Right.
It slowly started.
It's slowly thinking of your experience or your life like a story. So you're talking about the initial part of the story of like, how did we get here? What things brought us here? What do we believe currently? Right. So past, present, but then what's our plan here? What's our future look like? Because that's another thing that I see is, oh yeah, I'll just increase the dose like when I need to. And it's like, okay, but at what point are we done increasing the dose? At what point, do we get off this, or do we
what point do we become GLP-1 resistant?
At what is the plan? And I don't first, who is ever listening to this and they are going on it or are on it, I don't care if you're expecting to be on it forever. I don't care if you're expecting it to go on and off and cycle it. I don't care if you have a plan when you but I need you to have something. I need you to have an endpoint. It's just like college. Like, are you going to go to college forever and just kind of figure it out when you go? I mean, maybe, but that's a lot of money and investment and time. So usually when we go to college, we think we're going to get, we'll say, an engineering degree. Quickly realize there's no fucking way I'm getting an engineering degree. But then I create a plan to do something else that I'm interested in. Okay, so now I follow that plan. It doesn't have to stay there. It's not concrete, but you need something that's going to provide guidance, because even like we talk about in our weight loss plateau episode of what are we going to do? And because you need to know it's going to happen. So are you comfortable with continually increasing the dose? Or are you comfortable with coming off it? Or is that going to be so scary because of what you did to get there? How do you know that's gone? Like what you're talking about.
Well, and that's the thing is people are afraid to come off of it because they haven't done anything to change their reality prior to coming on it. Again, how did we get here? For people who want to come off of it eventually, and that's the plan, then we need to get down to the root cause of how we got there in the first place.
Right.
We need to get to understanding our emotions. Do we experience our emotions? Are we an all or nothing thinker? Are we a perfectionistic thinker? Are we someone who's a people pleaser and puts ourselves before others? And that has been at the detriment of our own health. What are we doing that is at the expense of ourselves? What are we thinking that is at the expense of ourselves? Because the food noise, and I know the food noise ramps right back up when you come off of it. So we know that's going to happen. So why don't we try to work on what causes the food noise? First, most people, food noise and food obsession is just an avoidance of what's going on in your head that you don't want to hear, you don't want to listen to.
Right.
So I can just focus on food. It's easier for me to focus on food. Everyone else is doing it. And I'm not focusing. Your whole internal experience is about food when actually that's so far from what the reality is. Your reality is your emotions, your thoughts, your wants, your needs. So beginning to learn those, beginning to understand those, because that shit doesn't turn off. From what I understand, you still feel emotions. You still feel like a piece of shit in your head. You're just not turning to food in the moment you're on the GLP-1. So how do we, number one, get rid of the feeling like shit in my head? And number two, feel the emotions, right? And begin to, when we come out of it, not even have to worry about food noise anymore. Or if it's there, we have so much awareness around what's going on inside of us that we catch it. We reframe it. We do something different. That's that.
And I want to take a gavel. Case adjourned.
Yeah. Ding, ding.
Ding, ding.
So how do we view our body? What are our expectations about this? If you think that this thing is going to cure you from all of your mental struggles, you are so wrong.
Yeah.
So wrong. Because you've been smaller. You've been smaller in your life, and you still feel like whatever you feel like. So again, figure out how we got here.
Well, even some of our studies that I pulled up. So we've got optimizing nutrition, diet, and lifestyle communication, and GLP-1 medication therapy for weight management. They have the importance of visual and metaphorical aids to improve understanding, the necessity for structured lifestyle programs, and the pivotal role of personalized diet plans is important.
Yeah.
So we need to include that. There's an interaction between diet and exercise and pharmacotherapy, which is essentially prescriptions, can be a promising treatment strategy, which positively influences GLP-1 levels in terms of benefits to improving metabolic parameters. So again, diet and exercise combined with this can increase your positive outcomes.
Here's the beautiful thing is, like, if we have that foundation, which I know we touched on, but say we did that, like you talked about, putting the diet and exercise foundation in place first, and then we microdose it, we can have a wonderful outcome.
Right.
That is not this dependency, sickly type of experience, because we won't need as much as people who are just trying to do it without changing their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've touched on a lot of things. You may think they hate GLP-1s. We don't. We don't. I hate that the industry is supporting them in this way that is almost miracle-like, and we're not even touching on what it does to our brains or lack thereof. We're not touching on the absolute need for psychological support around how you got to the place you got to, especially those who are in larger bodies and the overweight and obese population. I'm tired of this concept of like, well, it just shuts off the food noise, as if like that's acceptable to people. If you have a mental health struggle, right, you should be doing the work on top of taking the medication, whether it's anxiety, depression, OCD, whatever that looks like. We should still be doing active behaviors and learn skills and tasks to manage ourselves. I mean, my ADHD, I had these skills that stop me when I go into squirrel and bring me back to what I'm doing.
And it's very helpful when you use them. We appreciate it. As those of us on the opposite side of the spectrum who have OCD and anxiety, who hyperfixate on shit.
I guess I've never realized you are OCD and I'm ADHD. And
it's very.
That is us. We are the yin and yang of mental health. So we're not against it. I'm fucking tired. I'm fucking tired of it. Like, some of the people that I've respected so much, I'm just like, really?
I know. Me too. Like, come on.
Really? Like,
well, and it's so funny because some of the people that I respect in the industry, and just, generalization, some of their narrative has changed, being like, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. And then they start seeing what we have experienced with it with clients or with not clients or just the real world. And they're like, well, maybe not so great if you're not like actually in the right category to do this. And it's like, yeah. And also, like, even the providers that I work with, they're like, yeah, it's not that great. Like, it's actually does a lot of damage. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you for letting us know.
Yep. We just look at health in a very different way. Even our program in general is considered well, not taboo by any means, but just we're like the redheaded stepchild because we actually tell people like a lot of your issue is actually in your fucking head.
Well, and it's interesting. There's a gal I'm talking to, and she reached out to some dietitians, and the dietitian told her that they're not a good match. And it's because the dietitian doesn't support weight loss. And she eventually wants weight loss. And I'm like, I mean, I support weight loss, but I also support the systems of weight loss and the whys and the hows, and looking at maybe it's not weight loss we need to work on. Yeah, it's maybe more so why you got here. And then once we kind of tinker away and chip at that iceberg, you'll see the results you're looking for without the weight loss label.
Well, I want to share something. Let's see if I can find it real quick. So I followed this gal who has had a pretty big weight loss journey. Her name is the Lose It Log. Okay. And she is on a GLP-1. She has lost, I believe, 50 pounds. She works with a registered dietitian and a strength training coach. And I have reached out to her to say, hey, I'd love to give you access to our method to work on the mental health side of things and like collaborate with her. So she would have like her own link to our program if anyone signs up. But anyways, someone wrote on there, people know what they're supposed to eat, but I don't remember what the comment was, but I commented back and I said, people do know what they're supposed to be eating, but often fail because of food rules they have. As a therapist who specializes in food and body obsession, as well as a certified personal trainer, I believe we have to start with our relationship with food and the mental barriers that stand in our way, i.e. all or nothing thinking, perfectionism, people pleasing, lack of emotional awareness, and overachievement mentality. And that one comment has like so many likes on it.
You should post that.
I know, because I think people are finally like, oh, yeah. Oh, let's see what she said. She said, I guess I'm struggling to see the value because we all know what we're supposed to be eating.
But we don't.
Yeah. Right. So this gal, I really like her stuff. She's actually, she puts in good content. But so if you're someone who, say you're on a GLP-1 or you think about being on a GLP-1 or you want to come off GLP-1 and you want to do it in a way that is going to support future you mentally, physically, emotionally, check out the Clarity Call link below. We will create a plan for you that includes proper nutrition foundation, proper exercise foundation, but more importantly, we are going to clear all of the junk out of the yard so we can create a foundation in the first fucking place, because all of that junk is the reason you got here. We've got to smooth out the area before we can even lay the fucking cement. And that's what we do in our program. Damn!
Oh yeah, dog.
Get on a bad day. She's
raised the roof on these analogies today.
Check out the Clarity Call link below. You can also follow us on Instagram at Mindset of Matter Coaching and fitbyamanda.az. You can also check out YouTube, fancy new YouTube at The Mindset of Matter. And if you are considering to take a GLP-1, we want you to remember this one last thing.
What you say in the mind.
You see in the mirror, and a GLP-1 can't change that.
Ooh.
Bye-bye. Bye.